Hi, I'm Emma, and welcome to the Research Lab. This time, I'm pleased to be joined by Alan Lucas from Zuko. Hi, Alan. How you doing?
Hello, hi. I'm fine. You?
Yeah, good, thank you. So great to have you here today, and we're going to be discussing, I guess, all things form optimization today.
Yes.
So I think most people watching this, I would hope at least, understand, I guess, the importance of form optimization, at least as a principle. But I guess when we were discussing this session, Alan, one of the terms you kind of said to me was around this knowledge gap. So, kind of to kick things off, it would be great if you could explain to me kind of what you mean when you talk about this knowledge gap with regards to kind of form optimization and what are the kind of the risks involved in businesses not filling that knowledge gap.
But knowledge gap in terms of forms typically means you have an analytics on your forms, and you might know how many people read your form, and you might know how many people successfully complete it. But aside from that, your form is a black box. You don't know what happens. Your setup doesn't tell you what people are doing in your form, so you just don't know why people are dropping out of the forms, or if they're struggling with any particular field. So essentially, the knowledge gap is not having the knowledge to optimize your form from that perspective. So to answer your second question, the risk is if you don't have that information, how can you make informed decisions as to how to improve your form and therefore improve your conversion rate at the end of it?
So, in terms of those metrics, then that kind of help fill that black box, so to speak, what types of metrics would you be recommending businesses look at?
In terms of the basics, so everyone tends to look at abandonment figures. So what's the last field or element within your form that people interact with before leaving? And that's always a good place to start. You've obviously got to look at it in terms of total volume of abandonments, but also an abandonment rate, because forms, especially nowadays, are very dynamic. You might not be serving every question to every user. So you want to know what proportion of people who interact with the field drop out on it. So that's all. It's always a great place to start, but it's not the be all and end all. Other possible useful metrics that we look at are, field returns, typically corrections. So do people have to keep bouncing back to a particular field? How long are they spending in the field? Also, if you've got it set up, error messages, what error messages are being generated? Because again, you can see homing quickly on the struggles there. And the classic user segment that we use to start off with typically is users who successfully complete your form and users who don't, so they abandon. It is a key hypothesis that some of your greater insights come from the difference in behavior between those two groups. And one of the other interesting pieces when we talk about more advanced stuff is around behavior around a submit button. So people clicking the submit button on your form, typically they've entered a load of data. They're giving you their credit card details, potentially their name, lots of sensitive data. Click submit, and then if they can't actually complete what they set out to do, you've lost. You've lost people who want to give you money.
What other research or data methods, data points would you be suggesting people look at to help kind of, I guess, add another piece to that puzzle to help get them closer
Yeah.
to what's actually happening?
So the analytics piece often gets you very close to where the issues are, and may give you some indication as to why, because there's tools out there that let you show how users are moving through your form and bouncing and that sort of thing. But you kind of might want to overlay other things on top of that to give you. It kind of just helps you develop the hypothesis that you want to test. You said, okay, I know there's an issue with the email field or whatever. It's clear that there's a problem here. So what are the hypotheses? So as well as obviously just opening up your form, trying to break it and see what goes on, in terms of other data sources, there's things such as heat maps, eye tracking, user testing, those sort of things. It might give you something that the analytics don't. If there's an issue, like you say, people are trying to click on something that isn't clickable, which a form, if you've not set it up to do so already, a formal analytics platform won't necessarily do that because it's not part of the form. It's something else. So you're not tracking it. So you might see that, or like you say, they might, someone might be clicking on a more info button, which then distracts them and they go off, somewhere else within in the flow. I think heat maps are kind of useful in the broader sense for the website, particularly, you know, when you add the scroll elements in. I mean, on a form, it's very self-contained typically. Okay, yeah, and your form analytics will tell you where they've been. So but obviously, when it comes to your homepage, then, you know, and you're trying to flow people through, then, you know, you might find that actually you've put your elements in the wrong place, too far down, or what have you, and people aren't even seeing them.
From my experience of eye tracking, I think the value, I guess it's similar to heat maps in some ways, because if the form is performing well, then the eye tracking is only going to kind of just reinforce that.
We've done some eye tracking studies that are on our website, and you know, we tend to see it. It's a great tool for helping streamline the UX. You know, whether it solves your major issues, you may or may not identify them, but certainly we see things like, you know, where do you place your instructional copy? So we've seen cases where instructional copy is on the right of the screen, the fields on the left, people are dipping back, trying to, you know, what does this apply to? Does it match? You know, is that different in mobile? So, you know, frustrating. It may or may not cause an abandonment, but it's certainly unnecessary. And also with, you know, format of fields, classic example being drop downs. So you can see date of birth fields that use a drop down with, like, you know, year back to 1900 or what have you. You can see people going all over the place, and, you know, same with click analysis, but certainly eye tracking, they're going all over the place. Whereas a nice simple 3-box text input field, smooth, 1, 2, 3, move on, and you can use that to sort of, you know, demonstrate the best formats and the best structure for your form, which just creates a smooth experience, which again, harder to quantify the effect on it, but obviously, you know, it means people are spending less time on your form and are passing it through it smoothly.
So what do you think is the role of qual data within form optimization? Do you think it has a place?
It's certainly great to refine your hypotheses and also sometimes reveal, you know, kind of reasons why people do things and are dropping out. So an example that we've seen, the user testing helped reveal, you know, one of the answers, I mean, which in hindsight was fairly obvious, but people who are signing up for a credit check, they, you know, go through, give an email address or what have you. As soon as the email address comes in, error message was triggering a lot. And then, but it was because they'd already got they'd already got an account and just didn't realize it because they'd had some credit check or used the same provider before, or whatever it may be. So it's like, okay, what's happening here? And then you work out what they're doing is they're trying to work out, they can't work out anything. Eventually they click on to log in and go out, and which, say, is fairly obvious when you think about it. But it just refines the hypothesis. Okay, this, you can see someone actually doing it, because if you've not set the form up to do it, if the login button is outside the form, then you don't know what they're doing. You're just thinking, oh, they're getting an error message and then dropping out. And so I mean, it's a fairly simple example, but sometimes you do reveal things that you just don't realize. Particularly, I think with error messages, if you're not getting your error messages right, you can see how people are interacting with parts of the form or moving on, or just they're trying to correct an error message. It's really, really good for that sort of thing, because you can see, okay, how tight is my error message? How helpful is it? There's things that you don't know that is great for surfacing those hypotheses and then bringing it back to test. Say on a smaller level, it's okay, well, if we change the error message, you know, we've seen some users do this, we change the error message, is that going to affect things? Because we often say to them, okay, you don't have to necessarily pay for big sexy user testing, just let your mum do it or whatever, you know, just whoever, just someone, just see what their initial feedback is. And, you know, you get those things like, well, I don't even understand what this means, and the error message is even more confusing. You know, what are my net assets? You know, I don't know. It's that sort of those sort of things. So it's great for bringing that out, and certainly when you're trying to, often it's also useful to say, you kind of might know what the answer is, but if you're trying to sell into higher stakeholders to get action, which is often, as we know, in our industry, is the issue, is the getting the action once you've got the insight. It's actually, you know, very useful to show this is a real person who's suffering and not giving us money because their experience is bad.
So form optimization is clearly an important aspect of any website optimization efforts, whether you're already taking on form tracking or not. I hope that this discussion today has given you some inspiration for how to use this data and also how to create actionable insights from your data. Happy researching.